It's an honor to have you all here today. I just wanted to make a few announcements before we get this show on the road. One, the Chamber by policy is a nonpartisan organization. So what a core function of the Chamber does is to convene and facilitate information not only to our members but the community at large, which is our goal of today. That being said, we ask that you refrain from handing out any literature or any materials until after the event, outside of the event, in that spirit of bipartisanship. So, being mindful of everybody's time, I'm going to pass it along to today's moderator, Jordan from Alki Beach Academy. Everybody give it up for Jordan. Let's get this going.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Crawley. Thank you all for being here tonight. We've had some incredible engagement so far, both obviously your presence here in person, but also the community survey that the Chamber and the Dems put out in the weeks leading up to this. My last check, which was a couple hours ago, we had over 250 responses, which is incredible. Seeing people show up to events like this and being willing to have these conversations in person, I think is incredible. I love seeing the engagement, so thank you all for being here. I also want to acknowledge that we do have an elected official in the House with us tonight. King County Councilmember Teresa Mosqueda is here. She's been incredibly involved in the conversations throughout this process, and I know that she deeply values getting opportunities like this to hear from constituents, so I'm glad she's here tonight. As someone who grew up in West Seattle and now as a father of two raising my children here, I have a deep personal interest in how this project affects our communities, both the benefits and the impacts. With my family now having owned and operated Alki Beach Academy in North Delridge for over a decade, I also have a deep professional interest in this project. In my roles both in the West Seattle Chamber, running their Government Advocacy Committee, and in the 34th District Democrats, among the many hats that I wear, being the chair of their Legislative Action Committee, I've paid a lot of attention to this project over the last few years. And in those few years, I've had some really good substantive conversations with Sound Transit staff, including folks with us here tonight. And I've also, over those 3 years, developed a deep respect and admiration for the work that they do. Their job isn't an easy one. To bring a project of this magnitude through a community like ours is not a simple task. It's extremely complicated, and there's a lot of variables to take into consideration. So I also want to thank them for the work that they've done and the work that they will continue to do moving forward. And in that same spirit, I want us to remember that one of the main goals for tonight is to learn together. However much you think you might know about this project, I think I know an awful lot about it, but my goal for myself, my goal for all of you is that we all leave here having learned something new. And we want to keep things respectful and cooperative and welcoming, because we want this to not just be a conversation with Sound Transit staff, we want it to be the first of many. We want to be able to be as engaged, both deeply and meaningfully as possible as this project continues forward, so that our community's voice can be a part of this project. And in that spirit of partnership, in putting together this presentation that Sound Transit has put together, through that community survey that the two organizations released, we used that feedback to inform this presentation. So a lot of what you're going to hear is designed to answer a lot of the questions and comments that we got in that community survey. Once we get through their presentation, which should take roughly 30-ish minutes, we'll get into a question and answer segment. And I'll lead off that question and answer segment with some pre-submitted questions that follow those same themes that guided the presentation, as well as follow up on some things that are mentioned during the presentation. Once we get through that, then we'll get into live Q&A from those of you in attendance who would like to ask a question. I'll give more detail about our Q&A segment later, but thank you all for being here. Thank you, Councilmember Mosqueda, for being here. Thank you, Sound Transit staff. I think this is an incredible opportunity, and I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation. So.
Thank you, Jordan, and thank you, Rachel. Thank you for those opening remarks, for having us here. This is incredible participation, both in the survey online beforehand as well as in the room on this beautiful summer evening. We really appreciate you being here and are glad to get to be here with you to talk about the West Seattle Link Extension Project. My name is Lita Shaheen, and I am the Deputy Executive Director of Government and Community Relations at Sound Transit. With me, I'll be doing a lot of the presentation, but with me I also have Daniel Turner, who is our planning lead, Faith Rowland from our Real Property Group, Sandra Fan, who is also one of our project directors and leading planning. We have other folks in the room as well, so we'll be prepared when we get to our question and answer session. Partners, thank you from King County Metro and elsewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in, and bear with me as I manage the mic and the mouse and so forth. So what we're going to be covering today, we'll start with a bit of project context and overview. I know that this is a very knowledgeable group of folks, so please bear with us as we just try to level set with everybody, ground us in where we are with the project and how this project came to be. We'll then talk about the station planning efforts that we've taken on, as well as transit-oriented development and what that entails. We'll then go to our acquisition and relocation process and also talk about next steps. So, project context and overview. We'll start with, here is the Sound Transit voter approved system that was last approved in 2016. The system expansion plan means that every few years we are opening light rail. You may have heard recently that we opened numerous stations on the east side. We're going to be opening to Linwood August 30th. The West Seattle Link Extension Project is one of those Link Light Rail projects that will connect into the system, providing access all around the region to destinations from Everett on down to Tacoma and to the east side. We also have Sounder trains. We will have Stride Bus Rapid Transit as well. And what this means out in the community beyond providing for transit access is we are supporting jobs with this program. We anticipate 323,000 direct and indirect jobs between 2022 and 2046 as part of this program. The Sound Transit 3 plan also includes $100 million in system access fund. So we're really investing in how we get to our stations, providing for sidewalks, protected bike lanes, shared use paths, integrating bus and light rail, and also pickup and drop off areas. From a sustainability perspective, we are one of only 2 100% carbon-free light rail systems in the US. And in 2021, our emissions declined even as we're opening new stations and having increased ridership. So that's the big picture. Now we're going to zoom in on the West Seattle Link Extension and the service and access that you'll get to see. So targeting 2032, we'll be opening the 3 line, which is the West Seattle Link Extension, from SoDo to West Seattle to SoDo. That's the line that you see in pink with the number 3. So from there, you'll be able to transfer at the SoDo station to get anywhere in a regional network. But meanwhile, I do want to point out that the West Seattle is going to continue to have both light rail and the existing bus network that you have today, until we get to 2039, when we'll open a new downtown Seattle light rail tunnel. The 1 line, which is in green right now, will go from Ballard to Tacoma at that point in time. And so at that point in time, the 3 line, or the West Seattle line, is going to extend north to Southwest Everett, and it'll connect south, of course, to West Seattle. You'll be able to connect downtown to the east side on the 2 line and connect all around the network. So that is what service looks like going forward. A little bit more about the West Seattle Link Extension project. There are 4 stations that are part of this project. When we do open to Ballard, we'll be able to take a trip from the West Seattle Junction to Westlake Station. Instead of taking 30 minutes, it'll take 16 minutes. So reducing it by about 50%. We'll improve transit service frequency, reliability, and capacity. We also, as part of this project, are facilitating redevelopment near our stations with a focus on affordable housing, and we'll talk more about that program and how that works. We're also providing a travel alternative. If folks remember when the West Seattle Bridge was closed for repairs, having a redundant way to get to where you need to go. So this is a little bit of a meaty slide, but the intent here is to share our project timeline and also to sort of talk about where we've been and how we've gotten to where we are today. You don't need to be able to read all of this. We do have handouts later if you want to grab, and of course we'll share this so folks can get it later. So our project timeline includes 3 phases. We start with planning, that's in green. We have design for a few years, and then we have construction from 2027 to 2032. I'm going to talk more about the design and construction phases and how we work with community near the end of this presentation, but right now I'm going to zoom in where we are at the moment, which is in our planning phase. During the planning phase, we are engaging, we're nearing the end of it, we are engaging around developing route and station locations, analyzing those, and engaging with community to shape that. We kicked this off with alternatives, what's called alternatives development. So defining the alternatives that we would be studying in environmental review. We engage the public in a lot of ways, from neighborhood forums to community briefings and more. We also had a stakeholder advisory group, which some people might remember, and an elected leadership group that included members from the City of Seattle elected bodies, so the council, our board members, as well as a port commissioner. And folks from West Seattle and other areas along the corridor were in the stakeholder advisory group. Based on all the feedback, 3 levels of screening, the board identified alternatives we would study in an environmental impact statement, which looks at how the project and the different alternatives could affect the natural, built, and social environments. We released a draft of that environmental impact statement for public feedback and review. We got over 5,000 comments during a 90-day comment period. That, together with the feedback and the technical analysis that was in the draft EIS, the board identified preferred route and station locations or alternative, and they did request further studies of refinements to that alternative. We are now, and they did that actually unanimously, which is great for us as staff. And then we are now in the final EIS phase here and nearing the end of it, where we are preparing an update to that draft. You have a draft, then you have a final. It'll include responses to the draft EIS. It will update our analysis, and we will be publishing it, we expect, near the end of Q3 of this year. And so we haven't been able to be that specific before because we work and prepare this environmental document in collaboration or together with the Federal Transit Administration. They are our partner. And so we work together on our timelines, and we work together on the document, and we are getting closer, and so now we have a little bit more specificity for folks. So we look forward to sharing that. After we publish that, the board will, we expect them to select a project that we will build, and then the Federal Transit Administration issues what's called a record of decision. And that allows us to shift from planning to the design phase. All right, so now this is a map. It's a little bit zoomed in on the West Seattle Link extension. So the West Seattle Link extension, of course, extends to SoDo. But here we're just zoomed in a little bit given where we are. North is pointing up, so folks can get a little bit oriented. I'm just going to briefly describe the preferred alternative here, which is in pink. All of these alternatives are in the final EIS. They go from the draft to the final. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about the preferred alternative that the board identified. So in West Seattle, the preferred alternative crosses the Duwamish on the south side of the West Seattle Bridge. The Delridge Station is an elevated station that is west of Delridge Way Southwest and north of Southwest Andover Street. The route continues southwest and goes from an elevated guideway or track to being at grade, which means kind of on the ground, and eventually ends up below ground for the Avalon Station that's on the south side of Fauntleroy Way Southwest, under Southwest Genesee Street and 35th Avenue Southwest. And then we continue south towards the Alaska, sort of southwest, towards the Alaska Junction in a tunnel station that's located under 41st Avenue, straddling Southwest Alaska Street, so it's kind of under, with station entrances that are oriented to 42nd and also to 40th, and we'll have a graphic of that later. I did want to note, just with this preferred alternative that what you just heard me describe, there had been a long time in our engagement, we've been hearing strong interest in having underground stations in Avalon and Alaska Junction. This alternative, the preferred alternative, does achieve that objective while at the time staying within the realigned financial plan, so the financial plan of the resources that the agency had. Our final EIS is going to include, as I mentioned, updated information on the potential impacts and benefits of this project. So I'm not going to dig into those tonight because we don't have them available yet, but we look forward to sharing that with you when we do, and helping you dig into that. All right, now I'm going to talk station planning and transit-oriented development. What is station planning? We have some nice photos here that kind of hopefully evoke some of the different things that we do when we do station planning. This is really about looking at different ways from the neighborhood's perspective of how people are going to get to the station, ways we can make these trips safer and more convenient, looking at opportunities to create housing, retail space, office, shops, public open space, and really embedding what we hear from community and how these stations should be designed, and how they'd like to access the stations. So the elements that are highlighted here: station entrances, walking routes, wayfinding and signage, station connections, transit-oriented development that I'll talk about in a moment, so how we develop around the stations, and then things like bike and scooter storage. Those are just some of the examples. Your feedback is really critical in this. We start at a higher, more conceptual level based on what we know about the stations, and then as we advance from planning into design, we get into more and more detail, and there's more and more opportunities to engage. We also, very much so, need to work with the City of Seattle as a partner, and we do, and King County Metro, so our agency partners, and how we make sure folks are connected between buses and all the planning that happens around stations that is really under the city's purview. Okay, so transit-oriented development near stations. This is all about making the most of the land Sound Transit has to use our needs for construction. We buy property as we construct light rail projects. That is the primary purpose for why we buy property. That's the reason we're allowed to do that, or that we need to do that. But then when we have that property, we have an opportunity to work with the community on what happens to it after that transit purpose is no longer needed. So our program expands housing opportunities with a priority for affordable housing. We create welcoming neighborhoods. That's our driving goal here, and to realize community visions through this process. And I wanted to describe it just a little bit more by using an example of transit-oriented development near the Roosevelt station called Cedar Crossing. So whereas we've been working with you all, and you're gonna see some of the opportunities when my colleague here, Daniel, presents, we start at a higher conceptual level, as I mentioned, on what are the opportunities and what do people want to see near the stations, so that as our planning team is thinking about how the station is configured, that we can plan early on to just not preclude things the community would like to see. So we start to develop that list of community priorities early. And we've started to do that much earlier with our Sound Transit 3 projects, or later projects like West Seattle Link Extension. Cedar Crossing, the Roosevelt Station, this is from an earlier effort, but I'm gonna just dive into the point in time where they engage folks very specifically during the design phase, the later design phase, on what we wanna see and how we make that happen within the transit-oriented development. So questions are asked of community like, what are the types of uses you'd like to see? Let's make sure we heard that. The number and the size of the unit, so who would you like to serve? What kind of public space or open space would you like to see? And what kinds of services? And so we take all of that, synthesize it, and we talk to funders, to our agency partners. It informs requests for proposals. So for this project, for Cedar Crossing, for example, we began engagement in late 2016, before the start of the construction of the station. Heard from community, they'd like to see affordable housing, as affordable as possible, and wanted family-sized units and childcare, as well as a desire for ground floor retail. And so those kinds of elements were all included in the request for proposals. And now what we have at Cedar Crossing is an affordable housing project that provides 254 housing units, including 2 and 3 bedroom larger units for families. There's also a partnership with Seattle Children's and Mary's Place for folks that have more intense medical needs, with their families, and the ground floor has an all-ages playground for residents, bilingual childcare that's run by El Centro de la Raza, several retail spaces, and a public plaza. So you can kind of see that through line between that engagement and what we were able to achieve on the site. So we recently did some station planning engagement that you may recall. So while we have all of our work on the final environmental impact statement and all of those alternatives, we are trying at the same time to make sure, again, that we're not precluding opportunities and that we're informing the more advanced design work that happens on the preferred alternative. In the fall, we shared, so last fall, updated station design progress for Soto Station, for Delridge, Avalon, Alaska Junction. We shared that online as well as in person at meetings. We had a couple in-person open houses, one in the fall. We gathered feedback on concepts or ideas for access, for urban design, and for TOD at those stations, transit-oriented development. And then in March, we reported on that design progress, again, through another open house, and shared the community feedback that we heard, how feedback was incorporated. I will say there was also an online open house in between, and I should probably just, there was all of this happened. It's a lot of, it's a lot of colorful numbers here, but I just want to note, 1,200 folks responded to the survey, both in language and in English. We had a couple in-person open houses I mentioned. We had a couple drop-ins also in Soto specifically to make sure that those communities were able to engage with us along with West Seattle here. We heard quite a bit of feedback. I'm just going to do a little bit of a snapshot of the types of things we heard. Interest in stations that are easy to navigate and move through is a priority. Interest in improved access and getting to the stations, including wider sidewalks, bike lanes, more crosswalks at stations. Interest in more housing in the transit-oriented development near stations with a focus on affordable housing. People were also interested in seeing shopping, retail, food and drink, convenience services at station, as well as community gathering spaces and activities that create vibrant and busy stations throughout the day, improving that sense of safety and vibrancy as well. We are very interested in how we can really advance those kinds of opportunities and be creative around the stations. All of that feedback is helping to refine our design and will inform how we think about transit-oriented development in the future and engage on that. I'm now going to hand it to Daniel to just talk through the station.
Thanks, Lita. I'm going to walk through the 3 stations in West Seattle just to give a little orientation on the general layout of the station site plan. So we're going to start at the Alaska Junction station, and this is a conceptual site plan showing the potential station location, as well as some of the connections to other modes of travel and some potential transit-oriented development sites. In this graphic, it's a bit skewed graphics, and now north is kind of down to the left, so I'll just orient you quickly to the graphic. You can see Easy Street Records there, California and Alaska. If you go up the street, Alaska there, then you'll come up on the station. As Lita mentioned, the actual station platform would be underneath 41st Avenue, straddling Alaska. And you'd have station entrances on either side. So an entrance on the north side of Alaska, and an entrance on the south side of Alaska. And that south entrance is oriented towards 42nd Street. So you can see highlighted in pink where we anticipate the access points to be, roughly. So access from Alaska as well as towards 42nd. And then behind the site, an opportunity for transit-oriented development there in pink, or peach.
I'm sorry.
And then over on the other side of the street, another station entrance, and again, an opportunity for transit-oriented development kind of built into the station entrance there. Also some of the key connections, bus routes connecting on Alaska Street with the bus stops in front of each entrance. Pickup drop-off located on adjacent streets, and bicycle parking located within the station entrance. This is Avalon, north, which can make it dizzy. North is to the top and right. You can see 35th Avenue running kind of across the screen there, and Avalon, another direction. Fauntleroy. So this is, as Lena mentioned, an underground station. It's not a full tunnel. You can kind of see where, to the right of the graphic, where the tracks start to go below grade there. So they're below grade, but a bit open, and then they go into a closed section. You have two station entrances, one on either side of 35th Avenue. So station entrance there to the east side and to the west side. Highlighted in pink, you can see the access points. Bus routes connecting on 35th on either side of the street, as well as some other connecting bus routes along Avalon. Just going back one more, I'll just highlight a few opportunities as Lena mentioned for transit-oriented development in the area around the site where construction staging and other uses are needed to construct the project. Next slide. Last one is Delridge Station. North is kind of to the left. You can see Delridge Way towards the top of the graphic, and Andover Street. Yeah, like we're pointing.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Andover.
You can see the elevated
Delridge.
guideway coming along from the top of the graphic, cutting across the site, just near New Core, and then continuing towards the west. So this is an elevated station. The station is kind of at two levels, two grades. There is a grade that is the level of Delridge Way, where we would construct a plaza to connect Delridge Way directly to the station. There's also a lower grade, which is Southwest Charlestown Street, where bus connections would be made for northbound buses. So it's kind of an interesting site where buses would be coming along, traveling northbound at that Charlestown grade, and southbound up at Delridge Way. And also highlighted in that peach color is potential future transit-oriented development.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to start this and then I'm going to hand it over to Faye. So we're really looking forward to opportunities to serve West Seattle for the future that can be there, working together on what happens around those stations and how you'll access in the future. In the meantime, we do need to acquire property in order to build the light rail system. And that means, while we are looking for opportunities to minimize those effects as much as we can, there is a need in such a dense urban environment for us to buy properties. And so we're going to just talk a little bit about how we engage with those that are potentially affected, property owners, and of course tenants as well. So just to start, briefly, going back in time again, before we released the draft environmental impact statement, which included our understanding of who would be potentially affected, we did reach out to contact potentially affected property owners. We also shared a postcard, did door-to-door to try to get the word out as much as we could, especially as the draft EIS was released. The Sound Transit Board then confirms or modifies the preferred alternative, so we have a better sense of the direction that we are headed. During this time period, we had webinars and meetings for those that would be potentially affected, property owners and tenants, as well as office hours for anyone who had questions on the draft environmental impact statement. As we approach the final EIS, we'll be doing another mailer to the broad West Seattle area to let them know about how to access the final EIS, as well as reaching out to potentially affected property owners. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Faith to talk about what's next.
Great, thank you, Lena. As Lena mentioned, this is the part of the project that is coming up soon. Many of you know when we refer to the record of decision that we don't typically start acquiring property until after the record of the decision and the project to be built decision by the board. Those are two criteria for us. There are a few exceptions for those who've been tracking this project closely. The board did authorize and FTA did concur. We did start a small number of properties as an early acquisition, and those were just approved by our board in the last few months. What I can tell you is this next piece is probably the one that you'll feel the most, because we're going to be reaching out to approximately 400 to 500 folks that we need to acquire property from. And there are then a similar number of folks that are occupants of those properties that may also be displaced as a part of the project. And so this is the part where we do work individually with each and every property owner, with each individual occupant, whether you're a business, whether you're a tenant, whether you're an owner occupant of a home, and work with you to determine what your needs are as we help acquire the property and help you be successfully relocated into a new location. This is the part of the project that begins, as I said, right after the record of decision. And at that point, we reach out and we'll send a letter called a general information notice to all of those property owners and occupants, whether they be business or residential, that are impacted. We'll give you a person to talk with. It's a very individual process. I have about 85 folks that are working on acquisition and relocation support as a part of our projects. We'll meet you where you are, as we say. And so we do know that this is the part that feels hard for a community, because this is where we're asking folks to sell property that isn't on the market for sale, typically. We're asking folks to move when we need to acquire a property, and we're helping them do that along the way. There's a lot of detail that we can get into, but I just wanted to say that is really the place that'll come up after the record of decision.
And so then I think you're going to speak to, there's some other information here on the slide about, of course, we have to, in the final design phase, we understand better the property rights that we're going to need to construct. We're advancing designs, so we have a better idea of what we're going to need to operate and maintain the system. So that'll be part of how we reach out to you and part of that conversation we have with you. The board does have to authorize these property acquisitions. As Faith mentioned, you know, we're able to do some that were early. It is a very limited case. We have to get approval from the Federal Transit Administration to move that forward, and we've been able to. In some cases, it's possible we get an opportunity to as well again. And then I'm going to go ahead and have Faith talk just a little bit more specifically about our relocation assistance program and how we work with people and businesses that are displaced. This is a lot of text, but Faith is going to break it down for us.
Simplify it. Yeah. Thank you. So as Lita mentioned, there are really two categories of folks that are potentially displaced when we need to acquire property: those that are residential occupants and those that are business occupants. And there are two very different types of benefits, but I'll give you the highlight. And then we're willing to talk with each of you now to explain in more detail for your specifics, and or when after the board authorizes to move forward, then we'll again meet with you and get detailed information about how you might be impacted. In a business setting, we provide advisory services to a business owner the moment we know that they are potentially displaced. That advisory services is free and it is unlimited, as it were. If we need to move somebody's business, personal property, that bucket of benefits, I like to call it the category of benefits, is an unlimited category. So it's the cost to move items and reconnect them in a new location. We provide reestablishment benefits, so things to aid where it's not moving the property, but it's doing additional things, printing new business cards, printing new stationery, a differential in rent. Those are part of reestablishment. So the business category is very unique to that business, and we work to help you be moved into a new location. It takes a lot of time. An average relocation for business is about 18 months. That's about the time it takes. So I'll be honest, it's a longer, more thorough process. With respect to residential occupants, we have those that own property and those that are just tenants. And each of those are different categories of benefits. Really, the great thing that our federal benefits program has provided is, especially with tenants. If somebody's a tenant and we're working with them to provide differential and they pay a lower rent in one place, we know rents are higher if they have to move, they can take that rent benefit and actually become a homeowner by using it as a down payment on a house. that's a really important and cool benefit that the residential side of the benefits provide. With respect to a homeowner, how many of you got that 3% mortgage that you're hanging on tight to? A lot of us. And let's say you need to move to a home and get a new mortgage, and it's not 3% anymore. It might be 6%. There's actually a mortgage rate differential as one of the benefits for moving a residential homeowner. Every benefit paid to a displacee and a relocation is a non-taxable benefit. It's not income. We have worked closely with folks that are low income, and in order to not impact their low income benefits, worked creatively to really help prepay rent for a year or two so they don't have to show it as income. We really do try to work with individuals and help them. And so I hope that what you see is that we're very, first and foremost, our job is to treat everybody fairly and with respect, and we take that very seriously, whether it's a business displacee or a residential displacee. And so each of those categories, there's the relocation brochures for both business and resident are on our website for the project. There have been some changes in the recent rules from our federal government. We're updating those now, and everybody's getting benefit of those newer benefit amounts. So just look for those new brochures if you have one that you've downloaded already.
All right, I know we're close to our half hour, so I'm going to keep us moving. Next steps. So as I mentioned earlier, we are nearing the close of the final, or the planning phase, looking to publish the final EIS soon, Q3 into Q3 of this year. We expect then the board to select the project to be built, a federal record of decision before the end of the year. And then we move into the design phase, and I just wanted to speak a little bit as to what that's going to look like. So during the design phase, we continue engagement on station design at the milestones. We also engage in pre-construction planning. So really wanting to engage community in what that's going to look like and how we can make that experience as smooth as possible while still constructing a very large system, of course. We engage around station naming. We identify artists for station art. As Faith described in detail, property acquisition and tenant relocation is a major way that we are engaging and body of work that we are doing, as well as some early construction activities like utility relocation may begin during this time frame. Oh, and I forgot to mention, of course, we've got to permit the project, and we start to, we go out for our construction contract procurement, which is a very important piece of helping us understand what the next steps are going to look and feel like on the ground and getting more detail, and that is something we will engage with you on as well. And then finally, during the construction phase from 2027 to 2032, I'm telling myself we're going to get there, that we do have to demolish and clear where necessary to build and operate the light rail guideway. We do work in the ground, such as stormwater systems, column footings, all those kinds of things. Of course, we construct the guideway in the stations, safety education, testing pre-operations, but in particular, we have ongoing conversations with anyone affected by construction. We take being a good neighbor very seriously, so we'll be engaging on construction impact mitigation, noise, lights, dust, providing construction updates. We have a whole business relations program to support businesses during construction, a 24-hour construction hotline. You will have contact of one of us, safety education, and of course, we'll be testing and such as well. So I just want to highlight those at a high level, and we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you all for that. So we're going to get into Q&A now. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'll be leading off Q&A with some other pre-submitted questions, as well as following up on some points that were raised in the presentation. And then after that, we'll get into live Q&A. Once we get into live Q&A, just some guardrails on that process a little bit. There are a lot of people here, a surprising amount of people here, which I enjoy. But because of the volume of people here, we're going to limit everyone to one question. And if we get later into the evening and we notice that things have died down, we still have some time, And then we'll offer an opportunity for folks to answer additional questions, but for the first round, we're going to stick to one question per person. Also, I want folks to remember that this is a question and answer segment and not a speech and response segment. So try to the best of your ability to get bottom line up front. Let's ask your question so that we can be as efficient as possible and get as many questions in. So to run through these pre-submitted questions relatively quickly, are there ways that we could expedite this project, and where or when might there be future delays in the project?
Thanks, Jordan. I'm going to start, and then if Sandra, wave me down if you feel like we need to add a little bit more. So our aim is to provide this light rail service just as soon as we can. Folks may not remember way back when Sound Transit 3 system voter approved plan was approved. We put out a system expansion implementation plan. The timelines that were in the ST3 plan were very aggressive. And so in order to achieve those timelines, we as an agency working very hard to look at all the different ways that we could potentially streamline these projects, even just to get to that timeline. One of the major areas of focus that we had was during the planning phase, and how can you engage with community earlier to get to a decision earlier on what the project is to be built. So what is that preferred route and station location and so forth. So one of the next milestones that'll be critical for keeping the project on its path or supporting the project timeline would be getting to that project to be built decision this fall, so in Q4. So that's one aspect. You know, I think beyond that, we have opportunities, and we are working very closely with our partners at the City of Seattle on opportunities to streamline the permitting process for the project. Naturally, this is a very large and complex project, and we've been working for quite a long time with the City of Seattle on how we could potentially streamline that process. We talked a little bit about that during our station planning engagement earlier this year. That's a really important component of how we might be able to streamline the process. The construction component, you know, Sandra, I think this is fair. It takes a certain amount of time. There's ways potentially that we could try to look for opportunities to accelerate. Once we have a contractor on board, the final designer, we might be able to identify more of those types of opportunities. But these are the ones that are really near term that are coming to us. In terms of potential delays that could occur, do you want to speak to that for just a moment?
Sure. And so Lita spoke of some of the potential delays in the environmental and planning phase, which some delays have already been incurred through the COVID pandemic, for instance, and some of the coordination that wasn't able to occur quite as quickly. Moving into beyond the environmental process, however, permitting can be challenging, and as Lita also mentioned, we are working with the City of Seattle very closely to try to streamline the permitting process, but there are always unknowns as we get into that, and little changes here and there that could cause some delays. So I'm just identifying some of the risks that that the team has identified through the planning process and is continuing to try to manage as we continue to move forward and avoid further risk. There are risks that can happen during the construction process. We know what we know. We're only at, about 30% design, and there's still a lot of design to happen. And once we have a contractor on board, or contractors on board, we will learn a lot more, and they will bring more tools and more knowledge to the process and the design to design the project. And we'll do more exploration. For instance, some of you may have seen that we've done some field work. There have been some geotechnical borings that have taken place along the corridor. Only some though, and we've only been able to do so much of that without knowing what the project to be built is. So as we move forward into design, we'll be doing a lot more exploration once we know what the project is that we will be building, and we'll learn more through that process. Some of you may know that, for instance, a lot of Seattle is built on fill. So we know what we know. There are utilities underground. There are a lot of things underground that we don't we don't know that much about yet. So as we get into construction, we'll learn more, and we you know, it's hard to anticipate all the things we might find underground, but we are doing everything we can now and then through the design phase to learn more. But those are some of the kinds of risks to schedule that we may see as we move forward.
Thank you. So you all touched on the preferred alternative as it's been currently identified. You also mentioned that in the final EIS, there will be other alternatives included that will be discussed within the body of that document. Just generally speaking, what criteria are used when Sound Transit staff is making recommendations to the board? And do those criteria align with what the board uses to actually make their decision?
Sure. So as part of the environmental process, of course, we are looking at a whole host of criteria. How the project affects the transportation environment, so how you move around, traffic, potential displacements, residential, business, community, you know, services, all of those things. We also hear from community a lot about what matters to them, and that can be different in different places. Of course, we also look at things like cost and schedule. All of these are very important in the process. I will admit here that Sound Transit staff providing a recommendation to the board is new for us. It's been done in limited cases so far. So we're continuing to work with our leadership at the agency and with the board on ensuring that we're really clear about how we're sharing the information, the technical information we're seeing, the community feedback that we're seeing, and what is rising to the top to be a recommendation from the staff. So I hope that that is helpful.
And you also touched in the presentation on transit-oriented development. At what point in the project would transit-oriented development actually occur, and by whom?
That's a great question, and I meant to answer that in our description. So our hope is that we align the opening of these transit-oriented developments as much as we can with when service opens for the light rail. So we've been working to move that earlier in time, engaging earlier in these processes. We, Sound Transit, do not develop these sites. So as we engage with the community, you know, first during planning on what you'd like to see in those locations, say it's something like a grocery store, understanding what kind of footprint that might take or require, helping to think about then how just in sort of a configuration or a massing, like how big a building needs to be to support something like that. We try our best to try to configure those stations so that they could achieve those community priorities. Then in the design phase, that is when we're engaging much more specifically. We have a better sense of the station design. We know what our project is, and we're able to go out and ask more specific questions about the types of uses, the number of units, all of those things. We're able to put that then into a request for proposals, and we ask, so a qualified entity needs to be part of that, you know, respondent from the developer, and it would be a nonprofit developer, and they can partner with others. But we, Sound Transit, do not develop that. It also can be a public entity, so it could be another agency that has an interest. And then they take that development on.
Okay, thank you. Also in the presentation, there were some illustrations of the station locations. Could you offer some specificity as to what the stations will be replacing? What's currently there?
Sure. So to be more explicit, of course, as we're building light rail and we're building the stations, there are businesses and there are residences in these locations that we will be working with through our acquisition and relocation program, of course. I think I would probably need to pull up a map and point around as to what is specifically under each of those stations right now. I don't know if you want us to do that. I mean, that is all included in our.
Yes.
Let's see. One thing I just want to be kind of careful of, what I can do is talk about the geography, and hopefully that helps folks. We are going to be sharing an updated final environmental impact statement later this year, so that detail will really be in there. So I think what I'm going to do now is just point out generally the intersections of where we're at. So looking here, Daniel, can you just describe the cross streets all around this transit-oriented development site and the station site, and then the cross streets here again?
Sure, yeah, it's Alaska Street
It's here.
there, 41st and 42nd on either side of that site.
41st here, 42nd here, so it's this block around here, yeah.
Going down a block.
Yep. Jefferson Square.
So while Sound Transit staff is trying to answer the question, I'd appreciate it if we kept the volume down in the room so we can actually hear the response.
Right
Thank you.
here, that is Jefferson Square. Okay, and
then
then
on the other
here,
side there, between 40th and 41st.
yep.
I don't recall the exact distance, but it's just off Alaska.
And then, here, we've got, this is Fauntleroy, right?
Yep, Fauntleroy, so we'll call it the triangle, Fauntleroy, Avalon, and 35th.
And then
Between there,
Fauntleroy and,
it's hard to read on the side of the road.
I know. And then,
And 36, that's Fauntleroy 36, and then.
I think there is.
That's Genesee, that's right. And Genesee, and then on the other side of the street, 35th, you have the West Seattle Bridge, north there, and Genesee.
Yep. And then, the Delridge Station area.
Yeah, the station itself, Delridge, Andover, and Charlestown.
So here's Delridge and Andover.
Yeah. And then Charlestown, which is kind of
This right here.
quasi-private, yeah, and it goes up to 23rd.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
So what we just walked through, of course, are the general station locations that we're looking at. I apologize, we didn't come prepared to speak about every property that is impacted by the project. That information will be in the
It
final
is being
EIS.
updated
It
for
is
the
being
final EIS,
updated,
that's why we
and
don't have it.
anybody who will be affected will receive a notice so that you're aware that in advance of the publication of the final EIS. So, so again, as you see, we weren't really prepared to go property by property, but you can see at least the locations of our station areas, and you can see what businesses, for instance, would be displaced by each of these station areas if you're very familiar with the area.
Okay, and Faith, you also started to talk about the relocation entitlements, and specifically on residential entitlements. You did mention replacement housing payments briefly. Also, some information that I don't think a lot of people are aware of are what Sound Transit tries to do in finding replacement residential properties, as far as, I think the acronym is DSS, Decent, Safe, and Sanitary, and comparable replacement dwellings. Would you be willing to explain those things?
Sure. Thank you for explaining one of our acronyms. We have a lot of them. And DSNS stands for Decent, Safe, and Sanitary. So if somebody is living in a place that may not meet those criteria, in other words, it has to have potable water, it has to have cooking facilities, it has to have heat or air, depending on the place in the country it is. Air isn't required here, but it is in some parts of the country. Maybe it should be. And we work with a person if it's a large family and yet they're in a 2-bedroom apartment, and really they have enough children or occupants that it should be a 3 or a 4-bedroom apartment. Their comparable dwelling is that 4-bedroom. So we don't move them into a small non-DSNS property just because that's what they live in now. We put them in a better location that is appropriate for the number of occupants for that family or that family unit. There might be 2 family units. Then they would both get relocation benefits. Another important factor in especially a tenant, if a tenant, and I'm going to use a number that's easy to do math on, I'm not using something that's real here for a minute. if somebody's paying $1,000 a month, and we know that doesn't exist here, but let's say somebody is, and the DS&S comparable is $2,000 a month. That $1,000 delta is a benefit that they receive for times 42 months. So there would be a $42,000 differential housing payment to that tenant to move them into a larger unit that is DS&S. And they could also take that $42,000 and use it as a down payment on the house, just to give you math that is easy to understand. Is that the sort of the nature of the question you were looking for, Jordan?
Yes. And then also to kind of stick on this topic of real property and acquisitions process, what practices has Sound Transit implemented in the past to provide additional assistance beyond what's explicitly listed in entitlements?
A good example is we've already started working with the City of Seattle and their Economic Development Unit to determine what benefits that they might provide that aren't typically provided under relocation benefits. They have folks that can help negotiate a lease, as an example, for a business owner. That would save you maybe hiring an attorney for that step. We've worked with, as Lita mentioned, to really understand what the business needs are. We've worked with businesses that want to expand, and so they can do things more than just move what they have. They can take that opportunity to upgrade and do other things with some of their equipment. Conversely, we've worked with businesses that want to shrink. Technology and things have changed, and so they want to be in a smaller location. Move benefits are within a 50-mile radius. We always encourage you to stay within your community if that's what your choice is to do. But we've had seniors that we're working with to say, look, I'm moving into assisted living, so I need to move to another location. We have business owners that have gone virtual, and so things have changed for them. And so we really do work with you individually, whether it's residential or business, to find the tools that you need and to connect you to the services that you need, whether it's business or residential.
Okay, and then still on that topic, this will be the last question on that topic. For those businesses who may have difficulty covering the full cost of their reestablishment, what are some ways in the past that Sound Transit and our local government, specifically the city and the county, have invested in assistance, like mitigation impacts assistance, especially for communities of color and lower income communities like Delaware?
There's a lot in that question, so let me see if I can break it down a little bit. Reestablishment is one of the areas that is hard to understand within a benefits package because it's the one that has a number attached to it. And so folks tend to say, well, it says right here unlimited to $50,000. What does that mean? Think about it this way. I move personal property and we buy real property. Those are the two categories. And so reestablishment is not the moving of the personal property that is unlimited. It's the thing that I need to do to reestablish a business, like we said, whether it's rent differential, whether it is printing new business cards. Those are in a limited category. We really try to work closely with each displaced business to put as much as we can in the unlimited category. And Jordan, may I use the toilet example that you and I have used?
Yeah, of course.
Because Jordan and I have had many a conversation about moving small people toilets. And there are a lot of small people toilets at a daycare center. And so typically that's attached to the real estate. You would say, well, that's real estate, you're buying real estate. Well, I have the ability to say I can unhook that small toilet and I can move it to a new location, and then I can rehook it, including the plumbing it needs to rehook it, as an unlimited move expense. So even though it feels like part of the real estate, because when you sell your house, the toilet goes with the house, right? Well, in the case of something like a unique setting, a daycare center, where they have small people toilets, we can actually move that into a move category and move that as the unlimited. And if we need to reinforce the wall to attach that toilet to, that's part of that move expense. Now, building a brand new wall is part of the real estate. When you move out, you don't move the wall. The wall stays as part of the capital. And so if we need to put a demising wall that becomes part of real estate, that's a reestablishment. So it's very nuanced, it's very complicated, and we try to make it simple and move as many things as we can into that unlimited move box.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, this might be a question for the broader panel, is like, just for example, back in the early 2000s, there were investments made into the Rainier Valley community as the project, for the Sound Transit projects were moving through that community. Would investments like what was done in Rainier Valley be something that community should negotiate with the Sound Transit board, with local politicians? Is that something that Sound Transit staff could advise on the board, advise to the board? How might that process work?
So Sound Transit has a set of resources, and as Faith mentioned, we are working to maximize those. There are opportunities, and we'll continue to look for them, where there might be an opportunity to leverage City of Seattle or working on other partner resources to bring to the table to support communities. The case in the Rainier Valley, or these sort of potential funds that go beyond what Sound Transit has at our disposal, that's something that is not within our pay grade here, but certainly could connect you to folks who've been involved with that effort. It is something that would not come from Sound Transit, but from others. So.
Okay, and just one final question from myself. How can the community continue to be engaged in the process through service delivery?
Oh, that's a great question, Jordan. We look forward to continuing to engage folks. So there is an email address here. There's also a website, westseattlelink.participate.online, which is our online open house that stays live. So it's a great place to look and check in on the project. We also have an email update that we send out judiciously, but we flag any opportunities there are to engage project milestones as they arrive. So that's a good resource to tap into. We also have myself, BB Wu is our engagement lead. We have staff that we will continue to be available to engage with folks. Any follow-up conversations from today, we are happy to set those up if that would be helpful for anyone. I mentioned in the presentation a number of potential opportunities to things that we will be engaging on as we enter into final design, transit-oriented development, more of that design around the stations, for example, the access projects that we move forward with our partners, and of course engaging in pre-construction planning, how we can ensure that we are mitigating and reducing and supporting communities through the construction process. So lots of substantive things to continue to engage on, and different resources online, phone number, people, etc.
Okay, so that's my part of the Q&A. Something that Lita mentioned that I think is important to highlight is the online open house. For those of you who haven't gone and looked at the online open house, it's an incredible bank of information, offers a lot of detail on the project. So go check that out. A lot of your questions might actually be answered on that website. So if you're okay with reading a bunch of stuff, like this crazy policy wonk people, please go check that stuff out. So how we're gonna handle Q&A, a lot more people showed up than I had actually anticipated. So what I'll do is I'll actually stand up here to my right, your left, and if we could, for those who want to ask questions, form a line either on the far side of the chairs or down this aisleway here. And we'll go one at a time, everyone gets one question, and we'll kind of work through these as we go.
Now that you all are standing, I feel like I should stand.
And I'm going to go ahead and hang on to the mic, so as you come up here, just feel free to talk into the microphone.
Well, I didn't expect to be first. Thank you all for being here, and please thank your colleagues for all the hard work they've done on this project. Now, I'm a landlord, and I own a property that's probably going to be acquired. My attorney tells me that my tenants cannot be forced to move out before their current lease expires. So I guess my question comes down to, can I expect to own the property until the lease expires? Or might Sound Transit buy it earlier and become their landlord? I need to plan for reinvestment and taxes and know what to tell my tenants.
Great, I'm gonna hand this to Dave.
Great question, and I want to get your name and give you my name as well, so that we have a connection that if other questions come up as we go along. In general, we work with both the landlord and the tenants, sending general information out to start with that says you are a part of the project to be built, and the record of decision to move forward with this project has occurred. And so once that happens, we'll sit and talk to you about how long your leases are. I can't say yes to the question, do they stay until the leases? I don't know if they're 99-year leases, right? So.
I didn't expect to debate the question.
Yeah, it's okay, thank you though. And so we'll work with you on the duration of leases. We work with landlords to acquire property. Occasionally we become landlords. Oftentimes we can lease property back to folks. We time it so that we don't take possession of a property until all the tenants have moved. There is a minimum of a 90-day notice requirement, so no one will be required to move without a minimum of a 90-day notice. That's statutory. Now in reality it takes much longer than that to move folks, but there is a minimum period of time. And then we also work to pay protective rents in certain conditions and situations. So there are a lot of examples of ways that we work both with the landlord and with the tenants to make it successful for both of you.
My name is Chris Arkills. I work in government relations for King County Metro and have been a West Seattle resident since 1994. I wanted to speak briefly about a speaking point that many opponents of light rail have used in West Seattle in materials and speeches, including this one, that you will be required to take a 2 or 3 seat ride to get downtown. This is untrue. King County Metro and Sound Transit are partners in providing transit service to the people of King County, work together closely in many ways. Each time Sound Transit opens a new light rail extension, Metro holds an 18-month public process to restructure bus service to maximize bus and rail connections. Metro uses hours saved by transfers to rail to increase bus route coverage and frequency. This has happened several times already. However, when a light rail connection is not fully connected to the system, Metro delays that restructure until the light rail is fully connected. Sound Transit recently opened the 2 line on the east side, but because the segment across the lake is delayed by construction issues, Metro is delaying our planned restructure until the East Link line is fully connected. Similarly, when West Seattle Link opens to Soto, Metro has no intention of restructuring West Seattle bus service until that second tunnel in downtown Seattle and the extension of Ballard opens several years later. Metro and Sound Transit want people to ride transit. People ride transit when it's time and cost competitive. In the period between the opening of West Seattle Extension and the opening of Ballard, West Seattle residents will enjoy the best of both worlds. They will still have their 2 rapid ride lines and all the other buses going downtown as they do today. But they will also have the option of taking a traffic-free train to Soto to connect to the light rail system, which by the time West Seattle opens will stretch to Linwood in the north, Redmond in the east, and Federal Way in the south. Thank you for your time. I realize that wasn't a question, but
Okay, yeah, so thank you for acknowledging that at the end. So if you are in line, please question first, and then, so we can get through this efficiently.
I almost forgot my question, but anyway, I had a question about property acquisition. I know in some cases there is a tunnel, and how does Sound Transit entertain the idea of having underground easements instead of outright, buying the property? Do you do that, or because when I see the route, in some cases there is just a maybe corner of a property, is impacted, so you don't need to buy the whole thing. So how does that work?
Thank you for your question. I'm going to start an answer, and then I'm going to look to these two if you'd like to add more. So yes, in the planning phase of the project, we have an idea of properties that we may potentially affect. We put all of those in our environmental document to make sure people understand the potential effects, the magnitude of them. As we advance design in the design phase, we get a better idea of exactly what type of property we're going to need, whether it's an easement, full acquisition, something else. And our real property team will work with you specifically on that. And of course, between now and then, we also are happy to meet, and especially after we have our final EIS published and our letters out, we can talk with folks about what we're seeing, at least right now, at this level of design. Anything you'd add?
We buy all of the above.
Yeah, and yeah, we do easements, we do all kinds of things, so.
A quick follow-up, how wide is the transit right away? Or how wide is it, 60 feet or?
It's about 60 feet,
60
something like
feet,
it depends.
and then how much do you need for the maintenance on the side of it?
It does vary along the alignment, but I think your question, first question was more specific to tunnels, correct? Is that?
Yes, tunnels.
And in that
underground
case,
easement.
we are not necessarily, we may not be acquiring property above where the tunnel will be. So I wanted to go back and also answer that question.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying you probably need underground easement from a property, and how wide is the right of way for the transit, and how much you need, like 6 or 10 feet besides the 60 feet you need on each side? Or do you know that?
Yeah, I don't know if I can give you a standard answer for that, because it does depend on how high we are, how deep we are, whether it's cut and cover, whether,
If we're using a tunnel boring machine,
so,
all of that,
yeah.
so,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. Thank you very much for being here. You're all really great speakers. I'm wondering though, I think that the community should have more input. I know that you had 5,000 people, you said. I didn't know about that survey, and I know other people who didn't. I heard about this, and I'm wondering if you are willing to engage more with the people who are actually affected. For example, having a meeting at the West Seattle Health Club, at the Delridge Community Center, showing up where the stations are planned for, and being in person with the rationale. Because I know you mentioned 400, 500 people who you will be acquiring land from, hopefully. But every person and every business has a sphere of influence, so it's actually thousands and thousands of people who are going to be affected by the construction and the replacement of the businesses. So I'm just hoping that you will be allowing for another community, more community involvement, and perhaps connecting with community organizers here who can help you get that.
We absolutely welcome additional opportunities to engage. Other venues will be here, so I don't know if we'll take questions, if we'll have questions all the way until 9, but we'll be here until 9, so happy to take down contact information from folks. I do want to note, just because our engagement folks are here, that we have had opportunities to table at the community center, for example, to do tours hosted by community or community businesses. We want to keep doing those things and continuing to engage folks in all of the next steps of this process. So thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Larry. I have a question about the route. There were 3 alternative routes that were proposed that came from the Delridge station and went up to the Avalon station. 2 of those routes went up Yancey Street. The one that you've chosen goes through the pool at West Seattle Health Club. And there are a lot of people impacted by that. So I'm hoping that you will reconsider that and you will look at the routes that go up Yancey, because one of those routes actually tucks right into the hill the way that it would tuck in going through the pool. So I'm hoping that you haven't made that final decision, and I'm hoping that you will respect that request and think about it, and I'd love to know why the decision has been made to this point.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm gonna start if you want to add anything. The board, first I want to say, and I should have said this before, I know that the impacts of this project, yes, there is a business here or a business there or a residence, but the ripple effects in the community are, of course, go well beyond that individual acquisition. The West Seattle Health Club is a great example of that. We are actually looking at ideas for how, within this current alignment, that we could reduce those effects, and we want to work with the West Seattle Health Club to see if those ideas have merit. So that is something we're taking very seriously, and that I know that our board takes very seriously. In terms of the route and the decisions, final decisions aren't made until the board selects the project to be built later this year and we have a federal record of decision. We have come through a lot of process to get here, so I want to acknowledge that. Part of the reason that the alignment was shifted, or that new proposal, so there's going along Yancey and then a little bit further south, was to provide for better integration between buses and light rail at the Delridge station. So for most of the riders that we're going to have at that Delridge station that are coming from communities of color further south, that's going to be a really important transfer component, and making sure that we have with Newport there and with the light rail that we have a configuration that supports safe and accessible movement there. That was one component. Shifting it south allowed us to do that. In addition, we were asked to avoid effects to transitional resources. The other alignment did impact that important social service provider. Unfortunately, as you're doing these projects, when you shift an alignment, you hope you're limiting impacts in one place. You find something new with the West Seattle Health Club, for example, in this other circumstance. So we are trying to see if we can problem solve there. And then of course there is the next steps as we advance design, where we're going to continue to look for ways to minimize impacts. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate the information. I'm hoping you can quell a rumor that's going around that the original project was budgeted at about $2 billion, and it's now currently at $4 billion, which would mean a 4-mile project is $1 billion a mile to come over the Duwamish and into West Seattle. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that, and if there is a double cost overrun, where is the source of the additional funding coming from?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Of course, you've all probably been to the store or been to the hardware store or looked at how much things cost, or if you're getting food delivered, the costs that you see that are increasing. We as an agency, as well as other public agencies, are seeing cost escalation with our projects, and it can be for a variety of reasons, including real estate, increases in real estate costs, increases in construction costs, both for the materials, for the labor. This is a very large project, and this is a dense urban environment. So certainly cost pressures are a challenge. What we are trying to do as an agency, and we'll be always talking sort of more and more about this. I do want to note that we have a new deputy CEO of mega projects. We have an interim CEO who's very invested in how we look for opportunities to do things differently and more efficiently. So there will be more about that, I think, in the future, but it's looking at things like how do we become the go-to for those that are doing these construction projects, so that we can bring some of those costs of being out there and bidding in the market down. So there's strategies there. We're going to keep looking at those, acknowledging, of course, that you have cost escalation over time between us and other projects as well.
And who's paying?
And who's paying? We collect revenue from a variety of sources. I mean, I think that's part of a broader picture of what we would provide in the future. I don't think you are going to, we have a state statute that dictates how we are able to collect revenue, so we're not you'll know if we're gonna go ask for more money. So I hope that is helpful, but we take this very seriously. I do wanna acknowledge that. So thank you for that question.
Thanks. So my question kind of stems from knowing we were talking about how you try to aim to get two new developments to come online around the same time as the station opening. My concern always with station openings and just generally in the city, I know that this is Sound Transit, not SDOT necessarily, but pedestrian and bike safety in those areas. I'm a North Delridge resident. I've seen 2 people die. I've been personally witness to half dozen accidents that I've had to report to the police and provide my witness testimony. Like, there are a lot of conflicts that exist out there currently, and more traffic, pedestrian and bike and stroller and wheelchair traffic is going to come through those neighborhoods, not just in North Delridge, but at Avalon, over here especially. I think about taking our toddler to the urgent care. We go to the grocery store across the street, no crosswalks. We just do a sprint. There's no crosswalk between Fauntleroy and, well, essentially California, I don't believe. Or no, I guess it would be at the Safeway. But anyways, there are big gaps in the system, and we're gonna have stations that are, in this case, across the road from one another. Delridge is gonna be kind of on an island surrounded by pretty busy streets, and knowing that sometimes city traffic projects don't necessarily come online at the same time, having gone out to the Bellevue station opening and getting off at the southernmost station, getting on my bike, and then realizing that the trail through the slow, I never know how to say it, Mercer Slough, sorry, I don't go to Bellevue much, but the bike ride, it wasn't accessible, so I got dumped onto an overgrown sidewalk, and I was with my toddler, and it was pretty miserable. That's not a great experience when a station opens, and if that's not ready and in place when these stations open, I would be really concerned that we'd be seeing more incidents like that. So I guess on I don't know if Sound Transit can answer that, because I know it's a lot of working with the city and maybe other entities, but how can we work to ensure that that will be online, or that there's required improvements to make safe crossings accessible or ready?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm sorry to hear about seeing all that. But, you know, we had the station planning slide up front, so maybe kind of gloss over. You know, going into this project and just ST3 in general, one of the big changes in ST3 compared to ST2 was to really focus on station access and partnerships. And for this project specifically, starting almost from day one with a really tight partnership with the city of Seattle, so that everything we're doing related to station planning, and including King County Metro, is done together to avoid that kind of stuff. There's a lot of discussions around mistakes made in the past, and oh, we wish we did that better, or you know, this agency did this over here and the city did that over there, and you know, they weren't coordinated well. So the first thing is just coordinating really closely so that the way we're developing our site and the properties that we have lock in with what the city's plans are, and that we're delivering those concurrently. We also have new in ST3 our system access funds, so it's a set aside of funding that's available for each project to fund local projects that go outside what we're touching. And so we're working with the city, and it's been part of the station planning workshops to allocate those funds, prioritize them for areas that really need those improvements, and we would fund that. The city would deliver to be online with the station opening. And you'll see in the site plans that we have crosswalks here, but I know the city is looking to be, you know, ambitious, and they're really focused on Vision Zero. So we're just trying to partner with them as much as possible to leverage our investments and their investments. I know they've included some funding as well in their levy proposal, which is on the ballot this fall for station access, specifically for West Seattle. So that's the goal and the hope. I know that it'll be part of all our conversations as we move along forward in design with the city, and including construction as well. I want to lose sight that you know, safety during construction is also a big focus, both for the agency and for the city as they review our plans.
Can I add on? Sure. Just kind of curious then too, knowing that you have kind of constrained corridor, right, coming into West Seattle with the bridge and Pigeon Point Hill and everything else, a lot is channeled through there. The freight traffic down below, the only bike route really off of the peninsula, ensuring that those routes are still accessible. I know that a lot of us went through 3 years of the bridge being closed. When that lower bridge closed, being routed south 2 miles, and that was kind of a non-starter for a lot of folks. So I'm just kind of curious as far as ensuring those routes stay open and safe.
Yeah. We've been working on some potential construction scenarios for the city on detour routes that include capital improvements to make sure that they are, if not as safer than the current trail that goes alongside the bridge. While some detours might be needed for construction of that portion there. That's been a big focus of the last year and a half, working with the city on a really good detour route for that trail. And also on the freight traffic, part of the whole site plan concept there in Delridge is to abut the freight traffic sooner, so it's turning into the site closer there, so that by the time you get down to Andover and Delridge, you don't have that new core conflict anymore. That was one of the focuses of the board direction to improve that. And also looking at bike connections along Andover and improvements up the Delridge frontage. So this is a large focus. Please reach out if you want more information.
Yeah, and
I'd
we'll
love to
keep engaging
connect
on
with
it
you.
too, as we get better ideas or more concrete ideas. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you for coming out. Since most people are going to be accessing these stations using a metro bus or some sort of transit, why over a distance of about 1.25 miles do we have 3 stations? You're already on a bus. Why not drop it to 2 stations and save quite a bit of money?
So the voter approved plan in 2016 did include 3 stations in West Seattle plus the station at Soto. That is what we have been studying. There is an alternative that's in the final EIS that looks at eliminating the Avalon station. So we will have the results of that work when we publish the final environmental impact statement. I will say, just as a note, you're right, bus connections are going to be really huge at these stations. At the Avalon station, it'll be a primary connection from High Point, which is as well as communities further south, but for communities of color. And so we are just really focused on how, at Delridge, at the West Seattle Junction, and at Avalon, how do we create the most seamless connections for folks? But again, we'll study what it looks like if you eliminate Avalon Station and have that in our final environmental impact statement.
Well, you said the voters approved 3 stations during the vote. That was before we were aware of these cost overruns. So please keep that.
As well as they're making their decisions on the project to be moved.
Just because it's come up a few times, I do want to flag a note for everyone. So there are going to be some questions that Sound Transit staff cannot answer because they will be answered in the final EIS, and that stuff hasn't developed yet. They're also not the ones making the ultimate decision. So if your question is centered around what the decision will be or why certain decisions are made, those decisions aren't at this level. So those things would be better for the people who who are on the board. They report back to the board, but if your question is about like why was a decision made, what is the board going to take into account for a decision? Right, but you can also email the board.
Hi, I have 2 really quick questions. Is that okay? First one is, how long is the bridge going to be closed? Like 8 years or something? That's what I heard. 8 years.
The West Seattle
The West
Bridge?
Seattle Bridge.
Oh, for this project?
Yeah.
We're constructing a brand new bridge. There's no effect we expect on the current West Seattle Bridge.
Really? Not
Yeah.
closed at all.
No, it's a different structure parallel across the two.
The West Seattle Bridge will
You're
be
talking about
closed.
the US Seattle Bridge.
No,
For the Avalon structure.
not for our project, no.
How about getting material in and out? How are you gonna construct something if you don't?
Yeah, so let's try, if you're in the audience and you have a question.
Okay, got it.
Second quick question is, I heard maybe another rumor that Nucor is actually leaving town in about 5 years. Was any of that taken into consideration in putting the plan together?
We talk with Nucor a lot. We talked with Nucor recently. We have not heard they're planning to move in 5 years. They have shared that they don't have those plans. So.
Clearly, I have.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I think it's been a rumor. So, not that I want to speak on behalf of Nucor, but in talking with them, yeah, we have not. They're not planning to move anytime soon.
First, Jordan, thank you for organizing this. Thank you, 34th District Democrats and business leaders for pulling all this together. I'm trying to make sense of things. So the Puget Sound Regional Council predicts that in 2050, only 3% of the region's trips will be carried by light rail, and only 5% will be carried by public transit. They also say that it'll only be 15% public transit in the city of Seattle. In addition, your draft environmental impact statement says that whether light rail is built or not, the same number of riders will be taking public transit. So I'm trying to make sense of how much better can we spend $4 billion on transit than on building light rail that apparently nobody's going to take.
So I did mention early on in the presentation that when you have light rail as a mode connecting into a regional system, you do have the opportunity of changing a trip from Alaska Junction to Westlake from 30 minutes to 16 minutes. You've got speed, reliability, consistency there. So those are benefits that do come with being connected into the light rail system and connected throughout the region with this technology. We are continuing to plan for light rail, and that's what we've been guided to do by the voter-approved plan. We also look forward to, should there other be future extensions, West Seattle will get to be a part of that as a community that is part of the light rail system. So. And other than that, again, as George mentioned, you can always reach out to our board.
Thanks everybody for being here, and council members and Office of Economic Development and city people. It's good to hear new information. My name is Phil. I own the School of Rock here in West Seattle at Jefferson Square. I really appreciate this opportunity because I have been meeting with your team and they just give no answers and avoid all questions pretty much. And so this is starting to get some traction with the community, and I appreciate that. And my question is about business relocation assistance and business reestablishment. Because I have a franchise, I have a certain build out in a new building, and those have costs, which my franchisor estimates at $400,000 to $500,000. If there really is a $50,000 cap, and unlike the property owner, the gentleman who was curious about his tenants, he's going to be more or less fairly compensated. Tenants that have to move will not have any financial damages as a result of that, and in fact have some new opportunities for homeownership potentially. But businesses, we're screwed. We're absolutely screwed. It's not just me and my personal investment in the community over 10 years that's getting damaged, okay? It's everybody's access to an animal hospital, music education. And I appreciate the city getting involved, and Bruce Harrell getting involved, Teresa Mosqueda. You know, these are really small things that they're doing though. Frankly, I don't need an attorney to negotiate a lease. That's a joke. I can do that. We all have leases already. We've already done it. We need money for the actual financial damages that this project is doing to our businesses. And it's destroying our community, and we can save that simply by paying for it, simply by Sound Transit paying the actual costs to the community so that we have the money to reopen our businesses here in West Seattle, okay? So my question is, I found out about a grocery store in Linwood that received $1.2 million, 25% of their $5 million reestablishment cost. And I heard about a Jack in the Box that also received more than the $50,000 in Capitol Hill. What do they have to do? What do I have to do to get more than $50,000? I have toilets that I can move too, but what I really have is soundproofed walls, safety security systems for our kids, our 500 families that we serve. And I mean, the city of Seattle is, you know, the city of music. Give me a break. How is the city gonna help
Mode Music Studios, Mode Performing Arts, Skylark, the only all-ages music venue in the city, except for Vera Project, the only music venue in West Seattle, period. And our business, it's a joke. It's a joke that there isn't more people helping. So what is it that we have to do to get the help that those businesses receive? What was the trick? Was it a lawsuit? You guys have to answer this question. I've asked this so many times.
It certainly is not, and I'm gonna hand it to Faith here, but I want to take a moment. I hear you, and I'm sorry that you have felt frustrated. I think part of where we are in this process, and the reason you felt like you haven't gotten answers, is that it all depends. When we get a project to be built, or we get direction from the Federal Transit Administration that we can begin to acquire property, that is when we can get specific. We can get specific about options of where you'd like to relocate to, and we have something on the ground in front of us to actually have that example and say, here's the benefit.
To get more?
And
Answer the question.
it's, I'll go ahead and hand it to me.
Actually, the grocery store that I think you're referencing has actually received over $2 million in unlimited move expenses that were actual reasonable and necessary move expenses. And so I look forward to sitting down with you and actually looking at the logistics. I'm sorry you haven't felt like somebody from my team hasn't answered your question. I'm here today to answer your question, but I want to sit down with you and come see your venue. Well, now, let me give you an example. I said as a wall, we're not moving that wall. If you have a sound wall that can be detached from a sheetrock wall,
That's not how it's built.
we can, well, then we'll take a look at what we can do. I'm currently getting a bid to move a floor.
For the actual costs that the community is incurring.
Well, and again, I really do want to sit down with you individually and look at what the situation is in your business, and more importantly, where we're moving you to. Those are two components that we need to look at. And we've moved floors. I'm moving a basketball floor right now. And so we're figuring out how to move a floor. I can move things that are part of a move expense, and we showed that with the grocery store, I think, that you're referencing.
Unfortunately, Kat has already told me in the meetings that the things that I need won't be included in the move. And when I said, so I'm basically screwed, your whole team nodded at me on the Zoom meeting.
Well, I'll apologize in front of everybody here today to say that won't happen again. And you'll get my number before we leave here, and we'll figure out what we can do.
So we're running short on time. We've got some more questions here, so.
Thank you, Jordan, for organizing this event, and thanks everybody for being here. We are co-peers at the 34th District Democrats, so very happy to see you all here. So my question is, and this is kind of piggybacking on the gentleman who just spoke. My biggest concern is also for the welfare of the residents and the businesses who are going to be affected by this project. I am also not sure what's going to happen as far as relocation. Like, is there a guarantee, that's my question, is there a guarantee that the businesses who want to stay here after they are being displaced, that can stay in West Seattle? I have lived in West Seattle for 26 years, and I know that a lot of people here have probably lived in West Seattle maybe for decades. And so that residents and businesses that are here are part of our community, and it makes West Seattle what it is. We are a very community-oriented place. We have favorite businesses to patronize. We have, folks who are having children and growing up, and it's a very community-oriented place. And I am worried that a lot of these businesses who are being displaced are not going to be able to continue living here. So my question is, what is the guarantee that you can ensure to businesses to stay here and keep our community feel that we've had for donkey's years? And And also to help residents stay here without having to move to the south end or move up north or move away and not be here anymore and be part of this community. So that's my question.
Great. Thank you for that question. And what we do is work closely with each individual, whether it's a business or resident, and prioritize working with them to move where they want to move. And if that's in this community, then that's what we work with them on. We don't tell people where they have to move. That's a business's choice, that's a resident's choice. They can move where they want to move. We help work on resources in the community. We know a lot of people want to live in the community. We prioritize that, and we give people a lot of time. One of the things that we're doing is immediately reaching out with general notices and doing what we call an occupancy survey to find out what your needs are, whether they be residential or business. You know, I want to stay in this community. I have a franchise. I need to be within 3 miles of where I'm at. That might be one of the requirements. And so we work with those conditions. We have to know what those conditions are, and so we're going to work closely with you to do that.
So you will guarantee that anyone who wants to stay can?
Everyone who wants to stay has the choice to stay in this community. I'm not a person that can tell somebody what to do, so I want to say we absolutely work with each person to do what they want to do. It's their choice. It's not our choice where somebody moves.
I have a perfect piggyback, and I'll make your question quick. So,
Laurel,
do
Laurel,
you provide
gotta-
100% of the funding for those businesses to relocate? Back to the guarantee, do you provide 100% of the relocation assistance needed for these businesses to fully and successfully relocate and reopen in the community or the area of their choosing?
So because I don't know what 100% means to you, just like I don't know what it means to the next person, here's how I'm going to answer your question, which is every reasonable and necessary cost to move a business is a move expense. There are a smaller amount of reestablishment expenses that are limited, and that's a smaller category. The move expenses are unlimited, and so if it's actual, reasonable, and necessary, then that is a reimbursable expense. You have to move in order to incur an expense, and so we work with folks to determine where they're moving and how we can best get them moved successfully.
Do you have an average of how much, a percentage? I mean, you've done this in various communities now. Do you have an average percentage of how much it's cost out of pocket for other businesses to move? That's my last question.
So I don't know that we have an answer that's comparable. I don't know if there's an average. I mean, Faith, though, how many businesses have we relocated, or approximately? We are relocating businesses throughout. We've been expanding light rail throughout the region for a long time.
Based on the projects we've completed up to this point, I believe we've relocated successfully somewhere between 12 and 1,500 residents and businesses. We have approximately 150 estimate based on the current analysis, residents to move within the West Seattle project, and I believe there are over 100 businesses. Those are sort of the range of numbers that we'll have for this project.
Approximate. We don't have the final.
I don't have an exact
sorry.
number. I'm giving you a range because that's all I know today, until the board selects a project to develop.
Hi, I'm Kirk. I want to thank you all for being here tonight to share all of this information and for hosting this event. We know that West Seattleites are hungry for better transit. They voted overwhelmingly in 2008 for light rail, and they voted overwhelmingly in 2016 for light rail. And I love the Como poll that showed that light rail was more popular than the return of the Sonics or the Seattle Kraken. I'm just curious, you showed the renderings, but it's helpful for people to get a sense of what these projects are like in person. Of the new stations that are opening up this year, what would you recommend everyone in this room go see? Thank you.
What's your favorite?
For Alaska Junction, probably U District.
U District?
Station in our portfolio.
Okay.
Delridge.
Delridge is pretty
Kinda
unique because it's 2-level.
Yeah.
And then Avalon, kind of the international district, but not quite.
I like
no.
Roosevelt.
Well, Avalon's kind of a retained cut, maybe it's like the spring district, but there's not as much development around it. It's also somewhat unique. Yeah.
Well, actually, I appreciate this question because we are going to have a lot of light rail stations opening. We do have a lot recently as well. So as you go and take a tour of the light rail system, we love to hear what you liked about the station experience that you had, what you'd like to see at your stations in the future. As Daniel mentioned, the U District station for the Tunnel Alaska Junction station is probably a good example. Del Ridge is a bit unique. And then Avalon Spring District is probably the best one to take a look at. Thanks, Chris, our helper in the audience.
Hi, my name is Carolyn, and I'm a relative newbie to West Seattle. I've lived here 8 years. During that time here, the majority of the time, I have taken light rail to my workplace. I would like to actually ask a question of those in the room, and this is specifically those whose businesses, personal businesses, are not impacted, or residents whose homes are not going to be acquired. I would like a show of hands of who in this room takes light rail every day. Sorry, Metro. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Metro. Doesn't matter. Do you now? Thank you. I appreciate your honesty. We are a very privileged group of people in this room. And I would encourage everyone who did not raise their hands to take some time to learn about the communities that are benefiting greatly from this. Thank you.
Okay, I'll be quick, because Phil and I are looking for the same spot, so we're kind of in the same boat. Just wanted to piggyback a little bit on what he said, only because procedures and guidelines did state that for people like myself, I can't speak for Jordan, but that daycare is going to be a tough one to move, that it was procedure to come through and take a look at our spaces before the project started, before the environmental impact study started. This is something that I brought to the board committee. This is something, Faith, we can talk about, except that we did email you and you said you would get back to us and you never did. So and this is not to call, I know your jobs are hard. I don't envy what you're doing right now. But for me as a business owner in West Seattle and for the other businesses that are affected, I just want to know either, I know that you can't speak to why they weren't followed, but why we can't look at our businesses now and do that evaluation now instead of waiting until our businesses are acquired, because we're going to need to do so much more planning than a retail space. You know, I also have to build soundproof walls, and I also have to make sure that that happens. So is there a way that Sound Transit can start at least the resources that you're providing us, or saying you're going to provide us once that's being acquired? Seems like a small expense just to kind of start that conversation with us and make us feel more secure in your plan and the way you're going to treat our businesses in the process.
So I just want to say, if an email wasn't responded to, that's on me and Phoebe, and we'll check, because I know I work with Faith to support her, so I'm going to make sure what happened and where the miss is. And then I'm going to hand it to Faith just in terms of timing of the process, because I think there might be, I think we're right in line with it, and we're always happy to meet. We would very much welcome that conversation if we haven't been able to get to it in our prior ones.
So again, it is our goal, it is my personal goal. I've been in a lot of meetings that we've been at together, and I want to answer your specific questions. I want to come out and see your business, come inside, and so we'll work to schedule that. Clint, I'm going to call you out. I've got my deputy here as well. Clint Dameron is joining me, and so we'll make sure you have our cards and our phone numbers, and then how Phoebe and can track us going forward in communication with you. And then secondly, we'll get out and do an occupancy survey with you now. Let's do that now.
Thank you, because I don't want to wait for a letter.
I can what I can do is come and get information from you. We do that with a lot of businesses. I can get information now, and I'll commit to do that. Okay.
Yeah, I do want to just clarify though, it's not something that is required to do before we start the environmental process.
We do it after
we have
record of decision.
alternatives that are all across West Seattle, and so we want to make sure that we are talking to folks when we have a better sense of where the project is headed. But we'll do it, yes, yeah, but it doesn't mean we can't meet and talk. Michael?
Hello. I just wanted to ask a quick question. As a person and as someone representing an organization that's been following this planning process for 7 years now, the question I want to ask you is born a little bit out of frustration. Is that across this entire 7 years, I've repeatedly heard people ask Sound Transit the same questions. I've heard the same anecdotal stories come up from more and more business owners. And my question is, what is it that you are doing to address either internal Sound Transit policies or to work with electeds? And I know you have people who lobby electeds, or you have electeds on your board, to say there are things that are tying staff's hands that don't allow us to answer questions, that don't allow us to offer the benefits that people need, that community is asking for, that community is demanding. Because after 7 years, it's getting a little ridiculous when we do have these meetings and staff is forced to sit up there. And I know the frustrations you must be experiencing. That staff is sitting up there having to give these answers that are like, we don't know how that happened. I'm really sorry that email or phone call happened to you, because after 7 years, it's starting to sound a little like Sound Transit does not give a shit about the community.
Well, I didn't hear a question there, but I'm gonna just.
I think the question was, is Sound Transit staff doing anything to communicate to the board these frustrations that have been common across the years so that their hands aren't as tied as they are in the process and they can answer these questions more accurately?
So, I think it's a little hard to answer the question because it was honestly a bit general. I would say what is really hard as staff, if we're gonna talk about it, and I'm gonna share my feelings here, is that yes, we have been planning this project for 7 years. And what is hard is, of course, we don't have all the answers. And it's not because our hands are necessarily tied, except for that if we are allowed or given the direction on where to progress and spend our design time, we have more answers. When it comes to potential effects for property owners, for tenants, the benefits, it's really guided by who is going to be impacted and where you might go. And we can't engage in those conversations until we have direction from our board on the project that's going to move forward. And it's not just because of us, it is also that we prepare this document and work in coordination with the Federal Transit Administration. We have the Uniform Relocation Act that we are guided by, state policy, Sound Transit Board policy, in terms of how we organize. So I do want to say that we really care about meaningfully engaging folks. We are doing our best and we want to try to do better. So just hear that from us here. We'll be out there in the community. We haven't had a lot of updates, but I think we're starting to get towards this point where we're going to have some new information to share with folks and have some progress, so we're not saying the same things. Okay, over to you.
Yeah, so thank you to all those who asked questions. I'm glad we had this many people show up. I'm honestly amazed by the engagement that we had on our community survey. We are coming up on 9 o'clock, so I'm going to hand it over to our West Seattle Chamber Board Chair, Lindsay Wolper, to close us out.
Thank you, Jordan. I want to give a round of applause for Jordan for all this work and for the So I know this is a joint event with the Dems and the West Seattle Chamber, and I appreciate, there's a few of our members in the room, we really appreciate that very much. So like Jordan said, Lindsay Wolpa, West Seattle Chamber Board Chair for 2024. This is a project that is deeply important to all of us in many, many different ways. I will share with you, I have lived in West Seattle for almost 20 years now. I'm an out-of-stater originally. My husband is an out-of-stater. We chose to raise our family in West Seattle. So we care deeply about this. I also am a port employee at my day job, so I'm very involved in the maritime side. I too, like the West Seattle Transportation Coalition, have been engaged in this project for 7 years. I've been engaged in all the details. I've gotten to know Lita very well. That woman is unbelievable, and I think she deserves the respect of every individual in our community, regardless about how you feel about this project. So I really want to put that out there. There's a level of respect. In this day and age with our political discourse, we all need to respect each other in these communities. We all care deeply. Rumors, all the things that swirl around, we need to try to base our things in facts and be patient and know what the other person is listening to. So I will share with you, the West Seattle Chamber has not taken a position on this project yet. We've engaged in several lunch and learns. We've had several conversations over the last several years. The board has a scheduled meeting, our monthly scheduled meeting next week. We will be having a very deep discussion about how we're going to engage moving forward. It's very important because the West Seattle Chamber represents these businesses we're talking about. Many of you are not our members, but we still believe we are the businesses of West Seattle. And we believe we have a really important opportunity to gather all of these businesses and the interested parties to really learn these things and work together with this agency that is working, their butts off on these things and really deeply committed to what they're doing. I understand everyone has really emotional pieces about this, but we have a wonderful executive director, Rachel Porter, who's, I think we're coming up on, she's not even a year with our organization, and she is already rocking it. So it's something that we have a lot of work. So this is the first. We hope Sound Transit, you will come back and have more conversations. We will have more of these discussions. We'll figure out different locations within the West Seattle business community to have these dialogues. But it's something that I really want to base it in information. And the reality of, Jordan jumped in one of those conversations, they don't know a lot right now. This EIS, for those that have been involved in EIS, as I've been in a few with my day job, this is so massive in the amount of details. We're also one segment. There's also all of the Ballard pieces as well. So these are things that are dozens and dozens, hundreds of businesses, hundreds of residents. And so I just want us to all continue to keep that in perspective. Be patient as we can. I appreciate some of the dialogue and back and forth, and so we'll work with you guys to find more opportunities, to focus workshops, to have conversations, that we have a station conversation, that we have a relocation conversation, because I think sometimes when you try to lump it all into 1 2-hour evening, it gets to be a little much. So I'm going to close it here, but again, Rachel and I and Jordan are going to be working a lot on this in the coming weeks, and we look forward to engaging with more of the West Seattle business community. But again, we really appreciate all of you coming here tonight. We really appreciate Sound Transit, you bringing your team here, and all the work we know behind you and ahead of you. And thank you to each of you. Again, I will share my information as well. Feel free, I'll stay around for a little bit, but like I represent the maritime community, which we have our own set of problems that weren't even discussed today in this conversation that Lita knows well. So thank you again for being here. We appreciate the West Seattle community. That's why we love it. That's why we live here. That's why we work here. Have a wonderful night. Get home safe. Thank you.